I just love that intro. I'm sorry. Every time I just feel like it's like I'm at a rocking chair, at a nursing home or something in the mountains. It just feels,
Yep.
I don't know.
Micah Hanks is sitting over there. He's just,
Right.
he's just going at it, man, talking away, and you guys
Sun
are
is
nodding your
setting.
head. I
Mm-hmm.
love it. Hey, welcome back to an afternoon edition, a UK edition of Calling All Beings Fireside Chat, a name that Deb came up with. No, she's not aware of FDR. He did not exist. My name, I'm your host, TJ,
Yes, I know.
along with the co-creator of this joint. Nathan, how are you, my friend?
I'm great, man. Happy Saturday. I'm so excited for this show. Two people that I have been dying to talk with again and again. I mean, they're just awesome people. Great to have them on.
Debs, what is up, my research homie? Thanks for calling me a couple times this weekend and brightening my damn day.
Yes, well, frankly, I'm very excited for this show also.
See what
That's what's up, people. To be frank, that's what's going on. To be frank, be it with a K or a C, it just you're British. You're both badasses. I love it. So let's start off with the UFO Thinker, the former professional drummer and music teacher turned UFO analyst. Party people, put those hands together for the John Bonham of Bolton, baby, Frank Jones. Yes.
Love it. John Bonham of Bolton. Absolutely love it.
Get an amen.
Amen. Amen. Welcome,
yes. Sir. All right. Another one of his brothers is a man I've got to have some extensive conversations with. Not only do we share a military background where this guy was a British Royal Paratrooper badass, but then he decided to clean himself up a little bit. He dusted off his camos and got into the intel world where he was still breaking necks and cashing checks. So and he's still in the game as a consultant. So party people, put those hands together for my man, Franc Milburn. Yes.
Yes.
Breaking
welcome.
necks and cashing checks, baby.
Always.
How do you like me now? Yeah. All right. So welcome to the Fireside Chat. This is a format. This was Deb's idea. And basically the format you're going to see today is, we may ask some questions. For example, what weight of drumsticks does Frank use? And, what is the other Frank's favorite technique for killing an enemy soldier? So those questions could be asked, but other than that, it's kind of a round table format where anybody can bring up a topic that they so choose and will in fact do so. So some of the things I had lined up for Ask Nathan, maybe will come out on this.
It's gonna be a fun chat.
All right. So anyway, Nathan, take it away, man.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna start with one that, to me, I'm dying to know your thoughts on this. So let's go around. What is the thing you're tired of hearing about in the UFO conversation?
Other than me. So that's that.
You just feel like we've beat that horse to death, and it's time to move on.
Whoa, we lost Frank Milburn.
We lost Bald Frank. He'll be back. He was having a little connection issue. He'll be back.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask Frank Beard to start us off, though. Frank, you've been covering this extensively. I know you do a lot of deep dives. What's something that you're just like, here we go again. I don't really want to listen to this anymore.
Well, I think probably, I'm not sure if this is specifically to do with UFOs. It's probably in other aspects of life in general, but just unnecessary drama, I think is probably the thing that I'm sick of hearing about. Ever since kind of getting involved in this topic, there's just waves of nonsense drama and could do without it, essentially. It's just one of those things where, there's a distinction there as well, where it's not like disagreements that's an issue, because that's absolutely fine. But, when there's kind of any kind of like, personal attacks and things like that, it's just totally unnecessary. And right. That is definitely an aspect of the topic where, I think we could get rid of that and I would be quite happy, I
love that. Let me ask a second part to this question. What would you like to hear more of? So we'll hear what you're tired of, and then what you'd like to hear more of.
Data dense cases. Like we need is the new the new Nimitz, you know, because obviously we've heard about the Nimitz till the cows come home. I've talked about it on about 7,500 different shows that I've done over the course of the last couple of years, and I've always got a lot of love for that particular case. You know, all of the various different corroborated witnesses, and you know, it's even got video. It's got all of those, you know, the radar operators, the pilots, and everything. Those are the kind of cases that I want to hear more about. You know, those kinds of things. You can comb through thousands of videos online, and at the end of the day, most of them don't have all that big picture data, and that's what I would like to see more of. I know it's it's almost like a cliche, you know, like that's the golden holy grail of kind of UFO cases, but there are, you know, from the sounds of things, more of those kind of cases being held behind the scenes, and we only need a couple more of those to really add some serious weight to, you know, the conversation.
Love that. Thank you. All right, Frank Bald, let's hear from you on these two topics.
Frank C.
Just so
yeah,
folks
what
know,
my
he
part
said it
of-
was
yeah,
okay
I'd
for me to
say
call him
the,
that. Sorry, Frank. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Absolutely fine. Yeah, I'm tired of the troll as well. Like Frank Beard said, discussion is fine, and you know, having an opinion is fine. To get into personal attacks, personally, then I'll put the round stage. So I want to hear less of that. I'd like to see more of. They said, okay, they don't want to release more videos for various reasons. What I'd like to see is platforms and sources that Americans, Brits, Five Eyes, NATO have from like the 60s and the 70s, which are obsolescent now. Russia, Tehran know about, and I'd like, you know, imagery and data from those released, because they can be released now because it doesn't compromise any national security.
Love it.
Hey, I just want to say, Frank, if any of your cats are gaming right now, they may be using up some of the bandwidth for your internet because you're coming in choppy. So please tell them to turn off the Xbox if they happen to have their little paws in there.
Oh, sorry, mate. Yeah, I did actually kill the VPN and I reconnected, so let's see how it goes.
Okay, mate.
Cool. Thank you. DJ, what about you?
What I'm tired of listening to?
And what you would like to hear more of?
Well, I'd like to hear more of people sort of coalescing around an idea that this is a real thing, and let's talk about figuring out what it is and looking at the parts and pieces of it that our experiencers are reporting to us, because they're other than what Frank talked about, where we have, you know, professional witnesses with sensors and radars that are capturing data, then our best evidence gatherers are our experiencers who are interacting with them on a conscious and unconscious level, on an in-person level. They're receiving downloads. There's all sorts of things. And if we could get going on that discussion and just enjoy that, and kicking around the different theories without sort of saying it's this or it's that. Again, you guys have heard me say this ad nauseum. Nathan probably wants to slap me right now, but there's a computer screen preventing him from doing so. But it could be this or that, as opposed to this and that, as opposed to this or that. So if we don't get rooted, and you know, the Bigfoot community has the same thing. It's either this or it's that. Well, maybe it's both. We don't know. But let's talk about what leads us to some of those hypotheses. And what I'd like to hear less of is people sort of attacking content and content creators, and let's engage in a discussion about the phenomenon, which is why we came here, as opposed to, in the absence of ideas about the phenomenon, we're just going to try to attack other content creators. So that's what I'd like to hear less of. And let's focus on what we're talking about.
I love it. Thank you. Deb, what about you?
I am so tired of the term Zeta Reticuli. And
Bob Lazar, apologize to Deb right now.
And
Sorry,
I'm tired of the term reptilian. There's so much controversy with those. They're really not helping the topic move forward. I think we just need to say non-human intelligence or others or something, and kind of avoid those pitfalls. And I'd like to get more data and patterns. I like to look at the overall picture, and I think it's a lot more helpful if we just all get on the same page and see what the overall picture really is.
Love it. Love it. Excellent. Yeah, no, and I'll just add on to this too. So I'm tired of the OSAP ATIP conversation. Every time I see OSAP ATIP, I just throw it in the trash can. I don't care about that anymore. Or just
We
beating that
don't
one.
care who
There-
had which funding and which program was the
Yeah.
parent or the sub program. We don't care.
There's
Thank
not
you.
even a horse anymore. We beat
Right.
it into nothingness. Yeah. So, and I'd love to hear. I loved your answer, Frank Beard, to that. I'd love to see some more movement in the scientific community. Just more folks like Avi Loeb, more academics stepping forward. I think we're going to see that. Kind of from the quote unquote private area, but private spaces in academia, I'd like to see some greater enthusiasm and concerted focus on this topic and what it might mean for all of us.
Yeah, I personally I loved both of. I love Deb's answer and Nathan's answer. Both had provided some funnies because they're so interesting. Zeta Reticuli. That was great, man. But hey, man, that's what Bob said he read in that pre-brief that he got when he signed into A51. What I was going to ask, I'm going to ask this one of Frank with a C. Frank, what do you if you were some of these things you actually know in actuality, so I want to be careful, but if there is one aspect of the phenomenon that you think that governments writ large would most want to obscure that information due to the effect it would have on the public, what do you think that aspect, singular or plural, would be?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think first of all, the one that we all know, which is you don't want your air defense identification zone that you have no control over your training areas, in near Earth orbit or under the oceans. You don't want to have that in your area of operations as a soft state if you can't control it. Going a little bit more woo-woo, I think that if there is knowledge, for example, about a long-term presence of, and again, that major powers like the United States and its allies, and also including Russia and other countries, that if they don't have knowledge of it, but if, for example, there are ongoing mass abduction of, and I personally don't see how hundreds of thousands every year can be making up the same story. That would be something governments want to keep under wraps. And I think Linda Moulton Howe did fantastic research, for example, on cattle mutilations. Okay, that's another area that seems to have certainly FBI flummoxed, and also all the agencies in those states where those mutilations took place. So I think that's another area that the government would want basically to keep under wraps. Anything that they don't understand about the phenomena or the phenomenon or phenomena, the government doesn't understand, that then they would want to keep that under wraps, for both national security, so it's not so stupid, and also as well in terms of wider cover up of the knowledge effectively since 1947. If you have that have been working on supposedly crash retrieve technology and that have an unfair competitive advantage as opposed to other companies, if there has been nefarious activities that have taken place in cover up to and including silencing people permanently, then that is something that government would want to keep under wraps. And I think that's going to be a problem because even if they have people coming forward free from their obligation NDAs, I think that there will be a great dichotomy for Congress. Do we openly advertise what has been going on, what has been covered up, and cause massive political upheaval in the United States? Or is it something that we keep under wraps and offer people basically to keep all the nefarious activities from the public and from our enemies? Because the last thing that America needs right now is more political upheaval. But that's just my take.
Oh, you're on mute. DJ, on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Frank, we got you coming in by about 5x3 or 5x2. One of the I don't know if it was hi Ash from Ash from, I don't know if she's from Manchester or if she's from Liverpool. I know that she had a massive weight loss. Congratulations on that, Ash. Anyway, can you disconnect from the VPN and reconnect and see if we can get you clear, because you're coming in loud but broken. Can you try that?
Yeah, roger that, mate.
Thank you, mate. Okay, Debs, or well, actually, yeah, because that was the end of my question, so it's Deb's turn, my friend.
I'm sorry, can you say it again? I was thinking a lot about what Frank was saying.
Yeah, I asked him if what he thought about that the government would most want to obscure in terms of the information that they thought would, let's say, be the most upsetting to the public. I asked him what he thought that might be. He hit on a few of them that I thought,
Right.
and he added a few. So if you want to tackle that, then we can just
Well,
go
I
all the way around with that, Nathan.
I can definitely say that what I have heard that they're trying to obscure is information related to the abductions and implants. Um, that they don't really want people to know that they're researching that. And it seems like they're being dragged into the spotlight on that now, because it's becoming more obvious that they have researched it, but I'm not sure that they're a huge fan of that coming out.
I agree with you.
Makes sense.
Frank.
Yeah, so I think kind of a few thoughts to add on that, really. I mean, one of the things I would say would that it be either the progress that has been made in terms of reverse engineering and studying any crash retrieval materials, or the lack of progress that's been made, because either of those things, you're not really going to want to give any of that stuff away to any of your adversaries, are you? I mean, if you've made some progress, but you've not figured out some key aspects, you're not going to want to reveal that to anyone just in case they've come up with, certain things that aren't the same as what you have, and you may be giving them the final piece to the puzzle. Or if you've made zero progress, then if an adversary has made even a tiny bit of progress, they're ahead of you, and so it's kind of a weird stalemate, isn't it? It's like everyone's drawn the gun at the end of a Tarantino movie, but nobody wants to shoot, and those kind of scenarios. So I think that's probably the most sort of realistic, and also another thing that's quite intriguing, but perhaps a little bit more speculative, at least from the point of view of something that I could prove or anything like that, is the kinds of things John Ramirez talks about when he talks about genetic material, having been found, and the possibility that might be somehow related to human DNA. That would be a really disturbing kind of thing for the public to get their head around. So yeah, those are my thoughts to add to that one.
I love it, because if I can just react to that, if we had a top 10 list, these are all going to be on there. All these are going to be on there. And by the way, just in the Sasquatch community, and when I heard that David Paulides interview, that is a very close hold secret what the results of that DNA test were. And he was very uncomfortable being asked about it. And he said he doesn't have it, or it hasn't been released yet, and Dr. Ketchum hasn't released it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's because people don't want to know that answer. If we share DNA with this creature, because Nathan will maybe later on, and I know you have something else to answer, but from a religious perspective, that's probably disturbing for some people. Mm-hmm. If that's even true.
Right. Yeah, I would just add, echo what Frank had said earlier, and also what Jim Semivan talked about. There's a paper that he referenced that discusses the impact on states and state power of this secret, and I think that's really what is the most dangerous or destabilizing. You don't want to be a state power that says we don't really understand all of what it is. We don't have full control. It can come get you at any time. We can't do anything to stop that. By the way, it upends, a lot of our religious beliefs. It upends our history, who we are. I mean, it's such a destabilizing, I think, truth that is so open-ended that, the more you can kind of contain it, the more you can just preserve the status quo, even if the status quo is kind of busted. It's at least, the devil, right? So I think that's probably the calculus at play. I also think it's just an incredibly complicated phenomena. There are a lot of different players. It affects not only us at a civilization-wide level, but it affects us on an individual level. There's this sort of intimate connection that we have to it that goes beyond just how we think about technology or how we think about society. It can be quite personal. So for all these reasons, if I was in the room looking at the facts as they have them and what they could probably share, I would probably say, you know what, let's how do we put out a cool new reality show that'll distract everybody from this? Because I'd rather not, really rather not do that right now. So
I love it. We blanketed this topic. We really did. And Frank hasn't even gone yet, so we're going to get to Frank C. But what's interesting, Nathan, is that that's absolutely correct. That they can't explain it, and Lou Elizondo also said the exact same thing before Jim Semivan came out and said it. So it's definitely something water that you don't want to wade into, and we'll actually get into this a little bit later when we talk about Calvine, because both Frank and Frank we've had those conversations. But so Frank Milburn, the question at this point is, well, actually, no, you were the first to answer. So now we can go on to Debs. You're the first one to answer that question. We just finished up in your absence, Frank. So,
Yep. So it's funny because your question kind of ties into both what Frank C was saying, and also your question, because something that's been kind of coming at me lately is the extent that the government has covered this up. And actually, Dr. Diana Pasolka was just talking about how they used rubble to disguise the area in New Mexico where there was a crash retrieval. And Frank was talking about people being murdered over this. So I guess my question is, do you guys think that the whistleblower protection, the protection for people with NDAs is going to be effective, or are we not actually going to be able to move forward because of things that have happened in the past? And I guess I'll let DJ answer that first and float it around.
okay. It's funny. Frank and I actually spoke about this yesterday. It's funny that, and I said to him on the phone, I said, I'm a glasses half full kind of guy. That's basically how I live my life, and I think I'm pretty positive. But when it comes to this particular topic, I become pretty skeptical of what's going to be released, and I don't get giddy. I don't think you guys have ever seen me get giddy about, oh, I think we're going to get something big. You've never heard me say that. And then even people had thought that the United States Navy was going to be the savior of this topic, and the Air Force was the evil stepsister who was holding it all back. And then boom, there comes that article that the Navy says that it needs to hold back and it needs to protect and all that. So I don't feel very confident. And the other thing, kind of going back to what Nathan said, when Nathan said, it's kind of, it's not a very well kept secret, but we're such a small subset that we don't realize what a small subset of the population we represent in UFO Twitter, and our cousins that aren't on Twitter, like Linda Zimmerman, but are read into the topic. So I don't think that the whistleblower protections. Frank Milburn has some interesting comments on this, and I don't know how much is actually going to come out, because it's going to refute direct testimony from the principals in the program, Mr. Bray, Mr. Moultrie. And I don't think that they want to shoot themselves in the foot. So if they do, it'll be in closed session, it'll be in the skiff or the like, and we probably won't get the results of it. So I think we're going to be doing what we're doing now for the better part of the time that we're here on Earth.
who can pass the mic to?
Well, we could go to Frank, the UFO Thinker. Frank Jones.
Here we are. The mic has been passed. So yeah, it's something I've actually been talking about on my show a fair bit recently, about the whistleblower thing. And on the one hand, I'm quite hopeful about it, and kind of cautiously optimistic about the whole thing. because it does seem like, at the end of the day, the US government has the best toolkit to get to the bottom of any mystery. And, for us as people who are interested in this mystery, if we can get a little bit of some of the answers that they've been able to find with that incredible toolkit in terms of resources and the equipment they've got and the people power behind it, then obviously we'll have a better chance of understanding this mystery. And it feels like with this legislation going through, that is a step towards that direction. On the other hand, though, I'm also thinking about it from the point of view of these legal protections don't tell the full story. I've been speaking on my show with a few people about this. Just because you've got legal protection, that doesn't necessarily remove all of the obstacles for people to come forward, because there's still going to be potentially, allegiances, within certain aspects of the intelligence community, that, the DOD, etc. And if you kind of spill the beans, the people who are sort of, not necessarily allied with your push for transparency, that they can come after you in other ways outside of just kind of, the things that the legal protections won't necessarily be able to protect against. Like you might get passed over for promotion and things like that. That wouldn't necessarily be protected by the legal side of things. So, yeah, I mean, how close we're going to get to those kind of, the answers that we desire through these whistleblower protections remains to be seen. I'm cautiously optimistic about it, but the proof will be in the pudding at the end of the day, won't it?
I think everybody has the tools, Frank. Great Britain has the tools. Brazil has the tools. Italy has the tools. Germany has the tools. France has the tools. Nobody's doing it. Everybody is looking for the United States to open up this topic, and everybody else has the same sovereignty to do that if they so choose. They have obviously agreed, either in secret, somewhere behind closed doors, that nobody is gonna pop that can and rip it open. Otherwise, they'd be doing it. Japan, China. I mean, China's no Russia. These are not. The last two are not necessarily allies of are not allies of the United States, and yet they've chosen not to open up their files on this topic. So what does that tell you? It's not the United States' responsibility to do this. It's just that they've been more transparent than anybody else.
So you're not hopeful we're going to get too much in the way of answers then?
Yeah, we're not any more equipped to reveal what we know than any other government is equipped to reveal what they know. Now, we can collect more, maybe, but that doesn't mean that other governments don't have a file that they have chosen not to stand up on a podium and talk about that information open source for whatever the reasons are.
Yeah, I guess kind of my thinking with it is like, the government essentially are servants of the people in terms of, we the people of whatever country, whether it be the UK, the US, any kind of, modern, country that has the capabilities to actually look into things like this. And like you say, I think the UK do as well. I think they have been doing for quite some time, it probably in cooperation with the United States and other allies. And I just feel like at the moment, for whatever reason, whether it's a coordinated decision or whatever it might be, the US is kind of the one taking the lead on this. And I feel as though if there is indeed something that's being, kept under wraps, there are different factions within, whether it be the intelligence community, the DOD, and some people within those wants more transparency. And there's another group as well that doesn't want more transparency. And, it's a tug of war that's kind of ongoing. And, are we going to see the balance tip slightly? Obviously, it's been in favor of complete secrecy for a long, long time. And these new bits of legislation, you could say that is a slight tipping in favor of the other side of that balance. And I hope that it is, but we'll have to see, won't we?
Yeah, it's just there is nothing preventing any nation from disclosing what they have. No matter what legislation is enacted here, it bears no control or over a sovereign nation from revealing what they know if they want to, and they've decided that they don't want to. And that's, you can just name off any of the EU, any country, and they're going to tell you the same thing. Yep, no, we don't know anything. They're out there. Anyway, Frank, go ahead, man.
Is my sound okay, guys?
This is great. Brilliant.
Yeah, I wanted to second what Frank Beard said about the whistleblower protection. Okay, so you have a reprieve from opening up if you have an NDA. Obviously, talking behind closed doors to Congress, some kind of investigation, some kind of investigative committee. But if you are penalized by your employer, whether it's the government or you're a private contractor, you're going to be out of pocket in the meantime, and you're going to have to funding lawyers' bills until you get like the your complaint in motion and with the with the US government, and also in a more nefarious sense, there is no whistleblower protection for illegal activities, as in if you have knowledge of unfair market competition, where, for example, an aerospace company has been given some kind of artifact and they have an advantage over another aerospace company which has not had access to that technology, or if you've been privy to the cover-up and you know that there's been murders involved, or directed energy weapons used, harassment of scientists, then you're going to be thinking to yourself, well, these are the people that I've been working for, and even if I go into witness protection, right, the U.S. Marshals aren't going to be able to protect me because these people have a long reach. I mean, they've been operating for this long, for the better part of 8 decades, completely out of view of the U.S. government and with no legal supervision whatsoever, with no oversight whatsoever. So what's to stop them knocking me off?
Yeah, and I just want to say, from a civil service perspective, there just west and north of where east and north of where I live is the Apalachicola National Forest. And during one of the forest fires, a couple of the state forestry employees were told to travel some of these double track roads, these gravel roads that are in the Apalachicola Forest, and see if they find any distressed animals. Then you bring the animal back, and if they can heal the animal, they will, or they'll euthanize it, because the animals will sometimes run to the road, I guess, to get rescued during these situations where there's a fire. And reportedly, according to this documentary, and I don't know the veracity of it, they ran over a younger Sasquatch, bolted into the road, and they hit it with their vehicle that had a sort of up-armored brush guard on the front, and ran over it. And they loaded it into the truck and brought it back. And shortly thereafter, a couple of individuals from the federal government turned up at their base camp and said, "Take us back and show us where you hit it. Tell us the story." And they told them the story, and that's when they came with the finger in the chest and they said, "What you hit was a bear." And of course they said, "No, he didn't." And then they say, well, if you want your retirement, what you hit was a bear. So just remember that you hit a bear if you want to get your retirement. And then for contractors, I can tell you from having signed a couple of contracts as a contractor with the government, it is at-will employment. So I don't think I need to say any more about that.
Yeah, I would agree. And the one thing I would add to that, to me, that the protections potentially open up some avenues for those who are in fact already retired and have left the government and maybe had signed an NDA or have been part of these programs in the past. So if they had ever been part of a program, left the program, are not on the government's dollar, potentially those individuals might feel more at liberty to say what they know, at least in a closed door sort of situation. Even then, though, I would echo exactly what the Franks have stated, that there's a tremendous amount of pressure within these programs. You can only imagine, to be the person that sticks your neck out when your colleagues, even if they're your former colleagues, are not doing so. We're a very mimetic species, right? We look around and we kind of look at the room and see what people are doing. We generally do what everybody else is doing. It takes a lot of courage to step out and do something different. And I don't know that the reward is really there for individuals to do that. Now, some, I think, maybe feel a tremendous compulsion to do so. And I think those are the folks who, quite frankly, are kind of, I think of them as evangelists or even zealots, that they've had an experience it's not just they've worked on this, they've had an experience of their own. It just touched them on a very personal level, and they feel an obligation to humanity to talk about it. So you're really looking for those kinds of people who have that unique drive to kind of step out and share what they know and damn the consequences. So I don't know how many people like that there are. Hopefully we have a few, but
Jim Samivan,
yeah,
Lou
perhaps,
Elizondo, Rick Doty.
perhaps. But even then, I think we, tend to believe they know a lot more than they really do. This kind of gets back to what do we actually know? I mean, there are certainly secrets, 100%. But as far as what those secrets portray, what the picture actually is, I'm not sure we have a lot of clarity there. They can certainly point in some directions. Hey, maybe look over here, or dig a little deeper in this sap or whatnot, and maybe you'll find something. But yeah, I feel like we're in the season of pessimism right now, to be frank. And
that's twice two
I had
Franks
to,
during this.
I had to. But it feels that way. That certainly is the vibe that I'm getting now. I hope to be wrong. I hope that there is some sort of something coming out of left field that we aren't expecting. I've certainly heard a couple rumors like that, but I just don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
I've said from the beginning I didn't think Lou was read into everything, just because there are saps out there that he didn't have a need to know about that was not part of ATIP or OSAP. So I've said that from the very beginning, and I think he basically says that, although I think some people have shared some things with him unofficially that gives him some certain knowledge, but of course he doesn't know it all. Nobody knows it all. Even the people that know everything the government's done in our government, or be it the British government, still doesn't know it all. They just know more than we do. So that's compelling. Even if in aggregate it's not everything, because that information doesn't exist, or I shouldn't say it doesn't exist. I don't think what Jim said. And by the way, everybody, if you want to check out one of Jim's interviews that I absolutely love, check out Stuart Davis. He's a member of the Experiencer group, and it was a very different interview than the interview that he had with us. And I love that interview, just like I love the interview we did with him. But he's very frank, if you will. Yeah, he's very candid about what that he says. I don't think they know it all, and part of the problem is, and you, a couple of you spoke about this. Frank has spoke about it. Nathan has spoke about it. Is they're at a loss to be able to explain what they do know, because they don't understand. How do you explain something that you don't understand? I've been in that, situation. Someone asks you about the airplane, or something you don't understand about the airplane. Well, I can't explain to you if I don't understand it. So anyway, who's next? Oh, Mr. Frank, it's your turn. Maybe this is the first time we're going to hear you say report in this podcast. I hope.
Which Frank? Me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just to add, if it's cool, quickly a couple of thoughts on what you were saying there as well, before please. I get into my little topic sort of thing. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think sometimes everything becomes a breadcrumb that Lou Elizondo or Christopher Mellon or any of these people who've been on the other side of the curtain of secrecy kind of thing. And I think even they would say themselves that that's not really how it's intended. Sometimes they do leave breadcrumbs. That's absolutely correct. But as you say, I don't think Lou Elizondo has all the answers. He just has a very strong indication of where some more more in-depth answers may be located, and he's trying to get towards that. And I think Chris Mellon said the other day that he didn't think that Lou Elizondo was directly involved in any kind of a crash retrieval program either. But then again, he said exactly, but he confirmed that Lou Elizondo, as far as he knows, is not one of the people who's waiting to come forward to testify should these whistleblower protections be put into place. But he did also suggest that there are people, he's used the term peoples in plural, who have been directly involved with some of these programs. So that would be very interesting. That's kind of sort of corroborates what Gary Nolan has been saying as well. So there's a lot of very interesting things in that direction. We'll see how it all plays out over the course of the next 6 months. Anything you guys want to add before we get into my little topic?
No, go for it, man.
Yeah, so basically black triangles. It's an aspect of the UFO topic that I find particularly interesting for a few reasons. The sightings are generally, completely unambiguous. We're not talking about distant lights and things. We're talking about really clearly defined shapes of very large objects. In many cases, the triangles are actually very close to the observer. They move very slowly as well, so that they can be observed for longer periods of time, overpopulated areas as well. And often they've been seen by multiple individuals with radar returns and all the rest of it. And they almost never appear to land or crash, but they just kind of slowly go about whatever it is they're trying to achieve with what seems to be like a disregard for people watching. And obviously, they have very similar characteristics as well, even going back hundreds of years, which kind of suggests to me, at least, that they can't be explained by being modern black budget tech. So the specific questions, be interested to hear what you guys think, are what could these objects be doing? And also, what is going on with the lights? Which I suppose is a question about UFOs in general, but triangles in particular is a huge silent black object. If they turned out the lights at night, they'd be very stealthy. So why do they have lights? Do they want to be seen? So yeah, just to summarize, what are these black triangles doing potentially, and what's going on with the lights?
Frank C.
Sure. I made a few notes last night. I was up late reading. Obviously, I don't have all the answers, but if we're talking about triangle UFOs, I referenced what Colonel John Alexander has said about them, and also David Marlowe, who wrote the seminal book on triangle UFOs. So, first sighting, I think, was 1882 in like the Far East. So that's before the Wright brothers in 1903, right? And that's a long time before Skunk Works in the U.S. Air Force. And I also think that because of that time, that whole time frame from 1882, you can't say then that black U.S. projects could possibly account for all those sightings. And I also say you don't test that technology over populated areas. So I was looking through some British cases, for example, where you've got massive, hundreds of meters across triangles, and they're hovering across roads and basically casting shadows over fields and that kind of stuff. So you just don't test that stuff in a populated environment. And also the technology doesn't seem to evolve, because from 1882 to what we have today, what you'd expect with a terrestrial aircraft, whether it's like from the Wright brothers onwards, we've seen a direct progression in technology, right? From like biplanes to monoplanes to jets to scramjets, right? So you see a progression of technology. The technology with triangles doesn't seem to have changed. Also, as well, if you're talking about the aircraft are designed, terrestrial aircraft are designed for a specific purpose, and large flying platforms. I'm not talking about dirigibles, right, or balloons that are used for intelligence purposes or for putting out propaganda or advertising. Large aircraft like the Antonov or the Galaxy C5, they're designed to transport people and equipment, right? So I find it very hard to believe that if these were American technology, why weren't they used in like Afghanistan, and why we didn't see them in Iraq? Because you had horrific logistical challenges in both Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, I worked on convoys for a while in Iraq, so I was marshalling in. Like, you have a massive convoy, military convoy that comes in. You're looking like 200 trucks just with the supplies and the food, the water, the petrol, lubricants, plus all the supply vehicles. And you've got thousands of trucks transiting Iraq and Afghanistan every day. And from Afghanistan also over the Hindu Kush and traveling from Pakistan. So it's very problematic. So why wasn't this technology used if it were American? And also, if you're talking these platforms, triangles, they've got 5 observable technology. They can hover, they have instant acceleration. You've got hypersonic velocities without signatures. They've definitely got signature management, because some people have said that they kind of like disappear, or they look like they've got electro-optical camouflage. So if America had that technology, or if an ally had that technology, then why would you spend billions and billions on F-22 and F-35? Those are just my thoughts.
I agree. Money.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of those craft that to me feel the most ominous. I don't know quite why I have that reaction. I've not seen one, but the accounts of individuals that have tend to carry that extra level of weight. I don't know if it's because of the just the sharp edges and the black void of the object. As far as the lights are concerned, I take that to mean an evidence of their propulsion, their means of propulsion, rather than a means of illumination or of signaling that they're a craft of some sort that you need to watch out for in the sky. Um, to the point of stealth, if they're concerned about stealth, they would certainly turn those off, right? They don't seem to be concerned. That's the other thing, is they appear, they hover, they loiter, then they disappear with incredible speed. I mean, that those are indications of the other craft as well, that they just don't give two whats about what we think or where they happen to show up or whatnot. So um, I don't know that we also tend to want to classify these things, right? So it's the triangles are different from the saucers, are different from the orbs, are different from the cigar shape. So maybe these are all different sort of species, or it's hard for me to make that determination without a lot of more data. And we certainly also heard that maybe they've performed different functions. So these are kind of narratives that we project onto these objects that I think help us to categorize what we just don't really know. We're filling in this empty void with our own sort of stories to feel better about whatever it happens to be. There are certainly a lot of accounts of individuals who have seen these and even been on board them. I think the Terry Lovelace story was a triangle encounter, and there were, if I recall, vats of sort of beings being seemingly incubated in the craft. I don't quite know, that was the interpretation. So that is an interesting fact there. I don't know. It's I would love to know more, but I completely agree with Franc Milburn that the stories go back too far for it to be our tech. Now we certainly could have aped the tech later on, and or captured it perhaps and learned how to pilot them or whatever. But it seems like this is not something that we cooked up in a McDonnell Douglas hangar somewhere and just started.
We're just
flying
holding
around.
it back.
Holding it back,
Yeah,
because
we're
why
holding it
not?
back.
Right? Just the rainy day, you might need it. Yeah.
Yep.
Can I make another quick comment on that, guys?
Please.
Yeah, also as well. I mean, if you're talking about like these massive craft, like some of them are like, they're supposed to be like kilometers across, right? So if, for example, the USA, if this were US tech, so, where are these vehicles being built? Where are they being based out of? If you're using it for, whether it's, iStar or whether you're using it for logistics, like who's involved in like loading it up, who fixes it, who refuels it if it needs refueling, who pilots it. There's some kind of infrastructure that has to be involved with these craft as well. So where is that infrastructure and who's providing it?
Yeah, that's a great point. When you're finished playing pool, you put the rack up on the wall. Like, where do they hang these things? I don't
Exactly.
know. Right.
If you've seen like an automotive hangar, or even a hangar where like Boeing would build 747s, like out in the Seattle area, they're so enormous that you just couldn't hide and you couldn't keep enough people under wraps. There's so many aspects of what these things do, particularly the silent propulsion, that just makes them beyond us, that it's never been a question in my mind that it's not us at this point. Someday it might be, if humanity lasts that long and we can preserve the environment in which we live, the planet, and make it survivable for long enough. I've no doubt we'll get there, but not there now.
What do you, Deb? I don't think. I'd like to hear what she has to say about it.
yes.
I was gonna go right and give it to her. I'm in the middle, and then she's next. I was gonna give it right to her.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think you're going to have to build on a couple of things I'm pointing out, because you're the expert on this stuff, DJ. You're going to know some. So I think it's better if I throw these out there.
Go
So,
for it, buddy.
yeah, once upon a time, I was researching Alexander Libisch, who is an engineer that we got through Operation Paperclip. So he was a Nazi, and he created some really bizarre craft. And one of the things that he created was a triangle. And shortly after that, we started going to the delta shape. And I've been really fixated on watching delta shapes, but we still do not have something that is that big or looks anything like what people are describing. The closest that we have gotten is Russia was working on a helicopter. It was a 3-part helicopter that would have looked like a triangle to someone observing down below, but it never got off the ground. Well, literally, they never did it. I will tell you though, from like a human perspective, all of those craft that have that large triangle shape, they're like that for storage reasons. Like that was why they had the one in Russia being built. They wanted to be able to lift really heavy objects. And the Delta that they're working on now for the next gen fighter, apparently it's shaped the way it is as a big triangle in order to store more things underneath it. So that seems to be an answer from a human perspective. What something non-human would say, totally different. And the last thing I just wanted to comment, actually, I just have 2 quick more comments. One was that, with shapes, like Nathan said, shapes, we get caught on them, but they change shapes all the time. I was literally envisioning like this triangle just breaking off into little pieces while we were talking, because people see these changes all the time with these craft. They're not following our rules. And then as far as the lights go, they probably really don't care if we see their lights or not. And I don't really think they're like lights like we have. I think they're propulsion related. And that's all I wanted to say. Okay, DJ, please provide your expert advice on this.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm definitely no expert, but I could talk about what the triangle shape means in terms of aviation, and I'll start off with saying that David Marler said in some of the cases the broad end or wide end of the triangle was facing was the direction of flight, while the pointy end was not, and that tells you what I've been saying all along, is that it doesn't matter that something's moving through the air. It matters if it has a wing form. And if you just take a teardrop and you turn it on its side so that the fat end is the direction of flight and the narrow end of that tear, and then what we do is we take the bottom of that teardrop and we just slice it flat. If you do that so that only the top is teardrop, so we've sliced it so that the bottom's flat, and I start moving that through the air, Bernoulli's theorem says that will create lift, and now I have a flying wing. But in order to do that, there's a lot of mathematics on how fast I want it to go, means how swept back that wing will be in the triangle. If I want it to take off on short runways, then my wings are going to be straight across. But if I don't care about speed, and I'm like, okay, 300 knots is as fast as I need to go. But we start getting up 500, 600, 700, Mach 0.8, Mach 0.9, Mach. Now I have to start sweeping those wings back in order to take advantage and be able to go fast through the air, or you're just going to overstress the wings in trying to achieve that speed. So there's all these things. These craft, it's not the triangle shape that we can, obviously we can fly triangles now, because you guys have seen the stealth fighter and you've seen the B-2 bomber or triangles, but they are a wing form. And the UFO craft is apparently not, and it can just hover there. So it doesn't require the air in order to create lift like what aircraft do, which is why we call them aircraft and I call the other one craft. So, and plus the fact of what we said, David Marler said sometimes they're flying with the broad end facing in the direction of flight, and that goes completely against Bernoulli's theorem right there. That's not aerodynamic. That's not something that we would build, and be able to utilize the air to create lift. So there's that. As far as the lights are concerned, I don't know, Frank, but one of the hypotheses when you hear, like Rick Doty just told the story about how basically he was out near Tonopah, and it was a family driving, and to make a long story short, they saw a craft that made them pull over on the side of the road. They parked the car, and they did what a lot of us would do if they saw the craft coming back toward them. We might exit the car and go and try and hide in a bush. And they saw some sort of a beam of light come out of the craft, and then saw their young son and daughter get drawn up into that light and into the craft, floating up into the craft, and the craft left. And it was several hours later, may have been the next day, they were found outside of Tonopah by a couple of security police personnel, and then they got in with obviously the family reported to local law enforcement, and the local law enforcement thought they had done something to the children, but in any case they were returned. So maybe those lights have to do with over where I'm from, they've been seeing the light coming down into the reservoir. So then I would start to wonder, okay, that light, obviously, I don't think they're just having a look at the fish. So they're probably extracting something from the reservoir. What that is open speculation. I have no idea what they would be extracting from the water, but that's one thing. And we've also seen them use it, like I said, to be able to levitate people out of whatever structure they're in and up into the craft. I think Mr. Hickson and Parker spoke about that. So that's my thought on it. The other thing I was going to say from Nathan's point that I find fascinating is the most interesting experience, and Nathan actually alluded to a couple of them, that either there were beings that were being incubated, that there may be beings that were sort of embalmed, perhaps, aboard that triangle, but the most interesting experiences reported by experiencers are the ones that have been taken aboard these huge craft. And so that right there makes them real, because now all of a sudden you're aboard a craft and it's not just you alone. Terry's seeing children, he's hearing families, he's hearing people scream, he's hearing people cry, he's hearing his partner talking to him, but he can't turn his head. Just his eyeballs are moving. So a lot of interesting experiences surround that. I also wanted to mention to you, I know this is probably the longest I've talked on my show, but I want to mention to you that tomorrow I'm interviewing a chef from my high school show that's about my hometown. My hometown, I have, I don't know, I don't have a count of just my hometown, but probably 5, 6, 7 different individuals have seen triangular craft over our town and over Indian Point Power Plant, the nuclear power plant there. So I'm interviewing this chef, and I said, he was a classmate of mine, and said, Mark, yeah, we really want to have you on. Want to have you talk about Chopped and Food TV Network and your career and the CIA, Culinary Institute, all that stuff. And he said, yeah, I want to talk UFOs with you. I'm like, okay. And he said, yeah, and he told me the supermarket he walked out of and the gas station he was walking over to, and I can point, I've walked these very steps that he did, and he told me where he saw a huge triangular craft, and I think the 2 individuals working at the gas station also saw it. It was at night, and he was waiting for a ride home, and it just blew me away. It's just another person that had a triangular craft sighting from my hometown, and this guy, he's like, yeah, what do you think about Philip Corso's book? And, what about Doty and Elizondo? And, so we're going to be talking UFOs tomorrow night on my high school show. So that's all I've got on that one. Yes, the CIA is the Culinary Institute of America, Jules. So in New York. And now it's at Franc Milburn's turn, right?
It is. Yeah.
Unless anyone has a go back on anything that I said.
I just want to say something interesting about. Sorry, I want to say something about the lights. As with all UAP, it seems that sometimes whoever they are, they're not bothered about being seen. And then at other times, some of the reports that I've read with the triangles, like the large ones, sometimes they're moving around slowly and they're shining lights on the ground, or they're very lightly lit. And then other times they pass over people and people look up and they think they're looking at the stars because there's some kind of electro-optical camouflage. So they're seeing as if they're seeing through the object, but it's, the images from above the object, which is being reflected from the bottom of the triangle. So I find that intriguing as well, that sometimes they have this signature management and then other times they just basically couldn't care less. So that's intriguing as well. But obviously, just going about whatever they're doing with impunity. I mean, without a care in the world, it seems. But other times they want to hide what they're doing, as with other UAP. And I always find that intriguing. Why sometimes they want to be seen. Sometimes they're quite happy to play around with, U.S. Navy fighters or whatever it is. And then other times they want to be completely covert.
That would be really fascinating if there was even a Ryan Graves-like report of them seeing a triangle that was aircraft carrier size or whatever. That would be really interesting if we had one of those. That would be game changing in a way, and it would open certain doors that the Tic Tac has yet to open, I think. But Frank, would you have a topic you would like us all to consider? Unless there's any go backs on that.
Sorry, are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, what I wanted to talk about is what we've talked about already about the so-called whistleblower amendment and protection for people coming forward. I mean, that was really what I was going to bring to the party tonight. But happy to talk about anything else. Happy to listen and chime in with anybody else.
All right, I'm going to Money Nathan.
Well, I'm going to jump in on what you were. I'm going to go into what Frank just brought up. So
Sure.
I think it is an interesting point of conversation. So, this notion that they do want to be seen, and almost, at least with the Navy encounters that we have, there's an element of even kind of, I would say, if I'm anthropomorphizing it, there's an element of human playfulness there. Not just to be seen, but to be noticed, to be understood, to be acting under intelligent control, to give opportunity to observe. Like, these aren't for whatever it happens to be that seems to possess incredible technology that could decide not to be observed. The fact that it takes time to be observed is quite interesting and in and of itself. And I tend to wonder, we hear a lot about this kind of ramp up in activity. We've heard recently from some folks in the Ukraine, even that said that they had been monitoring the skies above Ukraine, and have noticed that there were a lot of unexplained phenomena happening in the sky there. But a lot of this uptick in activity seems to be happening in areas of conflict or areas where we have, some sort of operational presence or greater sensor platforms or what have you. Not everywhere, as you've pointed out, DJ. There are certainly areas that we have a lot of sensors where we don't pick up anything at all. But the point being, there seems to be this kind of, I don't know if it's quite cat and mouse, but there seems to be this attempt to disclose a little bit about what they are, or a curiosity perhaps, or wanting to engage with us on some level, but for what purpose? I mean, that is something we obviously could really go into a great deal of speculation. What is the purpose of giving us the opportunity to observe? Is it to, for whatever reason, accelerate the conversation? Is it, I mean, if you think about Nimitz, and Frank Beard, you mentioned this earlier, Nimitz is this, seminal case. It so much of what we're talking about now hinges on how good that case happens to be. And if you look at that case, it's like, in looking back on it, it's like intelligently designed to be a great case. It has all of the hallmarks that have, really kickstarted a lot of this conversation, or boosted it, is a better way to put it, in our current time. So if I try to take a macroscopic view, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Frank Beard, and then Frank Milburn. What would are there any sort of conclusions we could draw from these overall patterns? Is there something that you think is telling about the behavior in and of itself with these situations?
With triangles in particular?
No, I think just any of the encounters that we have, and this issue of signal management and engagement.
Well, yeah, I think like with the triangles, just to kind of start on that, there has been various different ideas put forward, like we were talking about Terry Lovelace and the possibility of like hybridization programs and things like that. And there's been mapping or surveying has also been suggested as a possible like mission that these things are on. But like, I've thought about those long and hard, and neither of them really sort of make a great deal of sense, because I mean, if you were going to map something, and I think Frank, we've talked about this a little bit as well. If you were going to map something, we have the capability to map something from space now. So it seems almost like a bit primitive to have a huge object that has to fly really slowly, really low to the ground. We can map things better than that. So like, it doesn't seem like that works for me as an explanation. And the hybrid thing, sort of could make sense, especially if people have actually been on board craft and seen vats full of kind of embryos and stuff. But even then, sure, they would cloak. And this goes to what you were saying, Nathan. It's like, it almost seems like they have the capability to be silent and not observed, as in not have the lights on. I mean, I've personally spoke to a few people who have had completely unambiguous sightings of enormous black triangles with no lights whatsoever. And it just so happens that they, caught on the reflection off the street lights and things, so they actually saw it. But so they appear to be able to move silently and without any lights whatsoever. So the question kind of comes up: are they specifically trying to be seen? And again, one of the things that's quite interesting about looking at black triangle cases is that the one thing that does tend to vary the most is actually the configuration of lights. So some of them have many lights going down the side. Some of them have the most common is obviously the three corners, the extremities of the triangle. Some of them have a big light in the middle. Some of them have colored lights. Some of them have lights that move. And it's almost as though they're trying to be seen, And it also, going back to the signature management thing, it made me think of what Dr. Gary Nolan was talking about recently on the Tucker Carlson interview with the case of a couple of people, I think it was in France, I forget the details, where they'd seen a huge, this wasn't a triangle, I think it was a disc actually, but they'd taken a photograph of it. And then when they actually checked the photograph, it wasn't what they observed with the naked eye at all. It was like a star shape. And it sort of makes you wonder, with triangles, are they even actually triangles at all, or are they actually sort of doing some kind of manipulation of consciousness to appear like a triangle? Because even the shape of a massive black triangle is almost designed to be ominous. And when you add to that the varying lights, is it some kind of messaging? Be interested to hear you guys' thoughts.
Do I get to go next?
Sure, Deb, yeah.
Yes,
No, please
okay.
jump in.
I'm excited about this because I literally wrote down the word communication while we were talking about this, because that's what Lou said. Even if we can't understand what they're doing, coming up and being right in our face is sort of like a type of communication, right? It's like waving. And it's very possible, even with these lights, that they're trying to communicate something. Maybe even trying to look like our craft with the lights is a way that they're trying to communicate something and we just do not understand. It's a possibility, and it should be considered that something about what they're doing physically and when they come in our face is communication of some kind. And also, it could also just very much be like what Villet says, a game of chess. Like he thinks that we're being guided on a certain path. And I found out, because I'm reading Passport to Magona today, that it may not be his idea, that this idea has been around for a while. So
That's a good one, Debs. I mean, Lou did that. He said it's communication. It's kind of like when Nathan was visiting with those Aboriginal tribes. They're reaching for his face, and he thinks they want to touch his face, but they really want his sunglasses. And he didn't get it right away, but it was communication.
Yeah.
And once you gave up your Ray-Bans, everything was good. You and your family were allowed to leave. It was all right.
Exactly.
It was like the Ewoks and Han Solo and the whole 9 yards and Luke.
Yes, it's a cool style no matter where you are.
Yeah. Even out in the bush.
That's right.
But no, I was going to. Actually, I have a question for Nathan, so I want to give this over to Franc Milburn to ask that question, and then I'm gonna go with mine. We've got about about 15 minutes, 20 minutes left or so.
Cool. So we want Frank to drop in on that
Yes.
conversation. So Frank, what do you think about this "look at me, don't look at me" capability and how the team tends to be used?
I think you'd have to take on a case-by-case basis. If you're looking at, for example, Nimitz, I have to ask, well, why these vehicles, okay, if you're talking Tic Tacs, they're intelligently controlled. They must have sensors to know where they are in time and space, right, to be able to get around, whether they're piloted or whether they're autonomous. So why would you interject yourself into like a major exercise where you have, a nuclear-powered, carrier strike group, gearing up for war? And I would ask the same thing about the Tehran case in 1976, which was a major Cold War hotspot. That border between Iran and the former Soviet Union, and with the Americans there obviously giving the Iranians the latest kit, the latest Sidewinders, the latest Phantoms, and then selling them F-14s. That whole border was like lit up in terms of electronic intelligence, communications and SIGINT. It would have been lit up like a Christmas tree, right, in the 1970s. And then this UFO not only interjects itself into this sort of highly contested area of potential human conflict, but it also detaches an orb, which the pilot of the second Phantom thinks that it is a missile streaking towards him. And then when he goes to launch his own weapons, it freezes up, and his communications back to base are frozen. His intercom with his Wizzo go out. So if that were, when you have British warships in the Black Sea or American warships in the Taiwan Strait, and they're confronted or they're buzzed by Russian or Chinese aircraft, that's a very clear signal, right? And it's a hostile signal. So I have to ask myself, in that case, why are these objects, if they're so far advanced of anything that we have, and they're obviously intelligently controlled or remotely controlled, then why are they engaging in these games with in areas of high tension with military forces from whichever country? That's the question I ask myself. And sometimes it seems playful, but other times it's been fatal, like with the Mantell case in 1947 or 1957 with Milton Torres, that F-86 pilot, American pilot in the UK, who was basically directed to take off by the RAF and to shoot down an object over the UK. So why do they interject themselves, the UAP, the intelligence behind them, into areas of high tension? To me, and also the whole nuclear thing and shutting down nukes or initiating nukes or flying over nukes or Rendlesham Forest, Brentwaters, where they're illuminating weapon storage areas, nuclear weapon storage areas, which they always seem to be interested in. To me, that's like intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance from an anthropomorphic point of view. And if they are so intelligent, would they not understand our understanding of their intentions by their doing those acts?
I was going to say exactly what Frank said is that our definition, which doesn't necessarily apply to them, we could try to apply it to them. That's why he said from an anthropomorphic perspective that what they're doing in some cases looks like surveillance to us, reconnaissance, intelligence gathering. We don't know that that's what it is, but that's what we come up with. The second thing is some of this issue that I've seen that has to do with tic tacs and orbs over the ocean. There's something to do with the ocean that they want to interact with the ocean, and we just don't know what that is. The government actually might know a little bit about that, if not in total. They may be able to tell us that they've seen them extract something, but they just don't know what they're able to do with it. The other thing, let me see, I wrote down something here. Sourcing. There's some sort of sourcing going on, but we just, that's what I would call it, but I just don't know. I don't know why that is. We did ask we asked Kevin Day if he thought that they could have spoofed or obscured themselves from the Spy 1 radar, from that phased array radar, and he said he didn't know. But from Nathan's point, hey, they showed up and did whatever they wanted to do with impunity with that radar on them. Did they detect that radar and know that they were being surveilled by that radar? It's hard to say. I would think that they did. I know I have a pretty good idea that when Chad Underwood turned on his targeting radar, that they knew that was happening because that's when they jammed his radar. There's also the issue of emitters. There's certain things that if Frank and I were to look at an aircraft, we'd say, ooh, that's an emitter right there for EW. And that's a sensor right there. And that's another thing that leads us to believe that this technology is so many generations past us, is that when you look at it, it has that capability, but it doesn't have any emitters and it doesn't have any sensors that are hanging off it, and we don't have the ability to do what we do with sensors without having something visible on the outside of the craft. Apart from radar, of course, radar sits inside a radome. So they must be using something that's probably like that, but much, much better. And then as far as jamming, we have to have an emitter that does that job as well, that can jam radar and throw off the position of targeting radar. So anyway, yeah, that's all I have on that topic. It looks like they're sourcing, and it certainly looks like ISR, but that's just putting a human spin on it. Nathan, I got one for you.
Frank had his hand up real quick.
Oh, sir, yes, please, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say, sorry, quickly, that was a very good point about the emitters. I mean, I can understand, the Americans flying, they want to go into contested airspace, or the Brits, and they have, dedicated EW aircraft, and, they use things like Nemesis, they launch drones, which, cause, radar spoofing and everything else, right? But where was that happening in relation to the Nimitz? And, you're talking, I mean, even 2004, right? So incredibly sophisticated, they had incredibly sophisticated, EW suites and counter EW suites, on those vessels. So was it something, electronic, something scientific, or was it something in terms of consciousness that, people's minds were being spoofed and technology was being spoofed by something that you can't even detect? That's what really boggles my mind, because I looked at Nemesis, and I looked at other things, and I talked to Kevin Day about this, and he was kind of like, well, we were so far out to sea, right? And it's not like they were like, Russian or Chinese, long-range aircraft with EW capabilities, like, loitering around in the area. So how would that spoofing have occurred? That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's an endless treasure trove of interesting analysis and hypothesis, which is why Frank's able to keep going on it, because there's so much there. The gift that keeps on giving. Nathan, if there is one force who created humans, the various intelligences that compromise the phenomenon, the universe, and consciousness, what is that? Is that God? What is that one force? Was that a person? What is that force?
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, we're going. We figured we just give you a softball to knock it out of the park right now.
We're going big. Yeah, that's an excellent question. It is. It's a challenging one. And this has certainly been talked about in different circles that we traffic in. Kind of, where does humanity come from? Are we an experiment? Are we kind of a modified species that was native to this planet? Is humanity perhaps ubiquitous throughout the universe? Are we kind of the primitive backwater for sort of human development for whatever reason, and maybe they're humans that are kind of everywhere? Wouldn't that be an interesting discovery? And in fact, if you look at the data itself from people that have experiences, experiencing human-like beings is one of the most common interactions. So that raises a whole host of questions. Are they appearing to be human just to make us more comfortable? Are they actually human? Are they related to us in some form or fashion? Do they have a hand in our development? So I don't necessarily know the answer to that big question, although I would say that, from my perspective on consciousness and it being fundamental to reality, at the root level, all of intelligence derives from this consciousness layer. And so the emergence of intelligent beings is just something which consciousness does, that it is not content to be a singular sort of state, that it is a little bit disturbed in a way, and in its disturbance it creates these individuated conscious agents, to borrow a term from Donald Hoffman. So no matter what these sort of intelligences end up looking like or behaving, or where they end up being in the universe, they are just emergent sort of fractal versions of this larger conscious entity. So we're in that way, we are all interrelated to one another. You know, we all stem and come from the same, ultimately the same source. And I think, at least for me, that's the most romantic and compelling narrative that I apply to this generally, because at the end of the day, whether we discover it's this being or that being or this whole host of beings, well, I mean, we're all still in this experience of reality together. We're all kind of on the same playing field. What is the playing field? Where is it that which we all derive? How is it that we all can relate and connect? These are the bigger questions that are more important to me than necessarily the the kinds of headline grabbers of there's a saucer, or this is what it does, or all of those things are certainly important, but for me, I'm more concerned with the bigger picture. So yeah, I don't know if that addresses your question, but I think my belief is that we're all connected.
Yeah, I think you think there's one source. Deb, it is the God source that you saw.
Yes.
I don't know if that was in the cave or outside the cave. Do you think that's the source? Do you think that source created both the phenomenon, us, consciousness as a construct?
Well, I guess I think of it in an almost scientific way. I think that we're on the outskirts of understanding some of the science that's behind all of this, including I've said before, I think there's science to consciousness. I think there's some understanding of quantum physics that we need to latch onto to understand this a little better. A lot of people are seeing similarities between all these entities that interact with humanity. And actually, some people have claimed that they share our DNA. So I have to wonder if there's some driving force, right? A source that has just kind of been experimenting across the universe, and that everything is connected because of that. And I think of what Grant Cameron said about like God was maybe bored, God was like a consciousness that was bored and created all these things to reach out, and maybe some of them aren't done cooking in the oven, so they don't have quite as much physicality or something. But I think there's a potential that there's a system of things across the universe connecting all of it.
Can it at least restore Frank and Mai's hair? I mean, is that too much to ask?
If you ask the
mean-
right person, they might say if you meditate enough,
I'm gonna talk to
maybe it could
Priscilla about this.
happen.
Yeah,
I'm going to talk to your partner, Priscilla.
maybe
Frank-
in past lives you had such great hair, you were like, we just want to experience what it's like not to have it for once.
I look like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. Frank, what's the source of all this? Frank, we're going to go to close it out. We're going to go to Frank K, then Frank C. What's the source of all this in your estimation? Have you thought about that?
It's a heavy question, man. Really is.
Heavy, mate.
It's
Like your music.
It's heavy. Yeah. I mean, I think what I do tend to focus on, as much as I find that side of things absolutely fascinating, I do kind of tend to focus on things that like get into the bottom of the mysteries that we can actually perceive in whatever realm of reality we can perceive, which I think is probably the main focus of what I tend to look at. But I think we've spoken about this before when I've been on, on cab before and things, and we've spoken about it privately. I tend to like the kind of super spectrum kind of way of looking at things, where perhaps that's linked to non-local consciousness, and the fact that the actual consciousness that we kind of inhabit on a day-to-day basis is a small portion of what's actually there, a wider reality. And it could well be that whatever the phenomenon is, or the phenomena are, actually inhabits some of the parts of reality that we can't perceive, and perhaps presents itself to us in whatever form that it thinks we can relate to. And it does that. And that sort of would, things like shape-shifting UFOs, why, entities appear in humanoid form, it would kind of go some way to explaining those kinds of things. A kind of an entity or an intelligence that sort of inhabits the parts of reality that we can't perceive, and if it wants to interact with us, it has to come down to our level to a certain extent.
I love it, man. That's a great way. That's our connection. Frank C, take us home.
I second everything that Frank said. More and more, I initially started when I came back to this of 2016. I was thinking very much in terms of like nuts and bolts, technology, craft flying around. But then I started thinking back to my childhood and things like Rip Van Winkle, which is basically like that's like an abduction story, isn't it? Bloke gets taken away and he meets some kind of like strange folk, and then he wakes up and suddenly it's years later. Well, that's like kind of missing time, isn't it? And if you look back to, I was talking to somebody about this, about Iran, battles between Alexander the Great and, the Persians and Dariush of Persia. Apparently there were, what they called at that time, burning or bright burning shields that were present above the battlefield. I'm starting to think more and more that these are things that have been with us for a long, long time, and maybe are not from anywhere else, but actually either part of our reality, have always been here with us on Earth, or are something that slips in and out of our reality. They're in like a parallel reality. And I don't know if it's like a parallel reality as in like, I don't know, they're coming from somewhere else and slipping into our reality, or if they're existing side by side with us, but we just can't see them. But then it also goes into the whole thing, about like, ghosts and phantoms and poltergeists, all that kind of stuff. I mean, is that part of it? I just don't know. But I'm more and more leaning towards the fact that it's something that's all around us all the time, some kind of like invisible fabric that sometimes we can touch, sometimes we can penetrate, but they seem to be able to do with impunity when they want to, whoever they are.
It also seems interesting that people have an experience and then have multiple experiences, and others don't. I mean, I don't consider myself an experiencer, although I had a brief sighting. I don't know that the craft that I saw when I was younger knew that I was there, or because it wasn't over the top of me, and Nathan hasn't had one. I'm wondering if it, because some of the people that are involved with looking at cryptids and with UFOs seem to have, and with ghosts, in fact, seem to have multiple experiences. I wonder if, I know Deb probably has thoughts about that, but we gotta have another. Deb, did you want to weigh in on that, ma'am?
I do. I have so many thoughts on this, so I don't have time to go into all of them, but I do think, we're really, like I said, getting closer to understanding some of this. When we look at all the information and we look for the patterns, people will see the same thing. There's some kind of paranormal network. There's some kind of what I call paranormal internet sometimes. We are now plugging in. Some people are better at plugging in. Some people are better batteries. But Gary Nolan's work, the work of some other people coming forward, and the work like what, philosophers do to inspire science, all of that's going to come to this at some point.
Yeah, that seems clear. Even if we don't have the immediacy that we want from the disclosure aspect of it, I do agree with you that we're becoming more sentient on what's happening around us as a result of conversations like this and with one another. And I think that's kind of where UFO Twitter should be going, is to just kind of kick around ideas, because then things occur to you that you hadn't. Because Nathan will tell you, I mean, Deb probably tell you too, I could not see the connection between UFOs and ghosts, and now I see it. I didn't know there was such a thing as Dogman. I thought that was like a fairy tale, and now I know that it isn't. And some of these other cryptids. So there's a lot of things out there that come into our reality based upon what factors I don't know. And some people have them recurring and some don't. But Deb, how about we say our goodbyes and thank our amazing guests, the two Franks.
Thank you so much, Frank and Frank. We appreciate your wisdom and the sharing of knowledge, of course. Please continue to do all the wonderful things that you do, and we will speak to you again for sure.
Guys, thanks very much for having me on, and all the same sentiments to you guys. It's been a real pleasure to be on, and really nice as well to have my mate Frank on as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. I love you guys. It's always great to chat. I could probably chat all night, but I've got to go to bed, mate.
Go to get to bed, mate. Nathan.
Yeah, just echoing what Deb says. Thank you both so much, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. And how you lead the conversation in your own spaces is very inspiring as well. And here's to the rest of this year and into 2023.
And we'll be, I think I'm seeing somebody on the left. I'm seeing another mystery guest for the British invasion, which we've got to schedule that episode. But I'm thinking that Franc Milburn coming in, throwing a hand grenade into that room, and then taking off will be really good. Frag everybody. All right. On behalf of Deb and Nathan, I want to thank our guests, Frank and Frank. You guys are amazing, and you're so cool. And moreover, not only just having these discussions, but I think the way that we feel is we just have these sort of new friends that have become like our family. And I think that's at least half of this, of why I'm here. At least half. Because the knowledge is great, but in a vacuum, it's just knowledge. Unless you're discussing and forming these bonds with people that you can call on the phone and speak with about it when something comes up or run something by somebody. That's my goal on UFO Twitter, and to have this sort of whole new family that I got to interact with the UK. I may see you guys again in January, the way it's looking right now. And I thank you on behalf of Calling All Beings. This is DJ saying peace out, one love. Thank you, Jules. We'll see you down the road. And as always, we're wondering what's up around the bend.